Farhad Ahmed Dehlvi, welcome to CNN News 18.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Vishal.
Farhad, your short film titled Please Hold, that was nominated in the Best Live Action Short Film category. You, of course, is the cinematographer of this 19-minute sci-fi short film and also our Indian connection at the recently concluded Oscars. So first, congratulations. But to start with, how's life changed post this Oscar now?
Thank you so much, Vishal. Yeah, I appreciate it. There's been so much goodwill over the last couple of weeks since the nomination came out, and it really makes you sort of look back and recognize all the people that you've encountered on the journey so far. And so many people have reached out, and it makes me realize that it really takes a village to get someone up there. And while we're talking about it, huge congratulations to Rintu and the Writing with Fire team as well. I mean, that's an incredible film and a really good accomplishment.
Then please share your Oscar experience with us. You, of course, attended the ceremony.
Yes, I was there this past weekend. It's one of those things that it's pretty bizarre to be there because you've always seen it on TV. And if anything, the spectacle is even more impressive in person. It's a really wonderful show. And so many of your heroes are there. Some of the cinematographers that were nominated are people that I've looked up to for years and years. And to be able to meet them and interact with them about their work and also just interact with them as human beings, it's pretty fantastic.
So you, of course, were present when Will Smith went up the stage and punched Chris Rock. What was everyone's reaction, especially those who were sitting around you inside the Kodak Theatre?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty bizarre because I think we all felt it was maybe part of the act. It was pretty soon after Chris had taken the stage and was sort of warming the audience up for this next section of the presentation. So for a few minutes, I think we were all just in disbelief until, the standoff and the swearing started between the two of them. Definitely shock. Personally, I mean, I'm not fully informed about, I've heard that they have some history prior to this. I'm not fully clued into that, but it felt fairly disgraceful and like a big disrespect to the hard work of everybody that had brought them to that event. Everybody was there because it was a celebration of the crafts and a celebration of films. And so much of what we do is about connecting people. And this felt like a very divisive moment. So it really left a bad taste in my mouth personally. Sort of without going into the motivations behind it or whether it's right or wrong, I think just seeing something like that unfold at this event in front of all these people and on live TV, it just felt sort of like it was not our best foot forward. But it definitely changed the tone in the room. It went from being very positive and celebratory and heartwarming to being a little bit of a bitter taste for the rest of the ceremony. A lot of people were sort of shocked at the beginning. It went from disbelief to shock to sometimes anger, and then sometimes sort of just rolling their eyes and wondering if this is really part of show business. It's definitely a part of the egos of show business are well known to those of us that work in the industry. And on some level, I think people felt that it was just an extension of that.
There were 8 categories at this year's Oscars, which were pre-recorded before the live award shows, and live action short film category was one of them. Cinephiles across the world weren't happy with this decision and expressed their displeasure on Twitter to the Academy. There were a lot of online discussions about how people who actually make movies were excluded. What's your take on this, and what were your friends and your other members of fraternity have to say about this?
I think it's not the right way to do it. I think there's some of these people, the best production design, achievement in editing, hair and makeup. These are the pillars of our craft. Without them, there is no movies. So I think it's disgraceful that the Academy, puts these into a pre-ceremony and then cuts them into the live broadcast. The ceremony was really long as it was. So I think if the goal is to make it more entertaining and more engaging so that the audience can sit through it on TV, I think there are probably better ways to do that. We're all storytellers here, so I think we can collectively come up with a better way to both honor the people that make the movies and give people a really good show back home. And I think this was the sentiment that was shared by a lot of people, both above and below the line that I spoke to at the event.
So this short title, Please Hold, this is a sci-fi dark comedy. It tells the story of this man who's arrested by a police drone and find himself trapped in a fully automated jail. Please tell us more about the film. What kind of challenge a sci-fi film throws at its cinematographer, and how much you shot against the green screen?
I don't think there was any green screen in the film. I don't think we even had one piece of green screen, because one of the early conversations with the director KD was that we wanted it to be sci-fi, but the reason to shoot it as a sci-fi was to sort of make people look at the present day technology and how we deal with technology, and echo this. So it's sort of set just a little bit into the future. It's not a very different world. Just some things have been changed. And all the elements that were the sci-fi elements, whether it was the drones or the screens or sort of the mechanical part of the police jail and so on, we did as much of that in camera as we could. So, we really wanted the actors to have something that they could play against when they were performing. So a lot of the screens were done live, and a lot of the interaction with the drone was done live. The drones themselves, I have to give a shout out to Dave at Last Pixel, who came on the project and built the drones in VFX for us. So we had a version of the drones on set, and then he took that and put his concept around it in post, and that's what you see on screen. And I think it adds so much to the film, doing exactly what you're talking about, sort of selling the idea that it's a science fiction reality.
And that's what attracted you to the movie?
What attracted me to the movie was the fact that it had a very interesting message. It's talking about, the privatized justice system. It's also talking about how people can get lost in the justice system, which I think, having lived in America for 10 years now, and also having grown up in India, are both, places where this is a huge problem. Mass incarceration of people, often from marginalized communities or people of color. So it's definitely a story that immediately resonated with me. And then I think KD, who also wrote the film, has done a really good job with balancing this sort of slightly grim message with a dark comedy, a black comedy tone. So I think it's the kind of film that draws you in rather than pushes you away or makes you feel like you're doing yourself some educational work by watching it. It's a very enjoyable film to watch. And at the same time, I think it really touches on something which is a conversation that we need to have about criminal justice and about technology, and how much we're surrendering ourselves to technology each passing day.
To me, your journey is quite inspiring. You have grown up in Delhi, and then you went to LA and joined American Film School, and you have shot many short films, been part of camera crew of many big Hollywood films, including The Dark Knight Rises, To Life of Pi and Kaminey, and now you are shooting movies in Bollywood. I have another question for your Bollywood journey, but before that, please tell us about your early days, how it all started, how you bagged your first movie in US.
Yeah, I mean, I came up as a camera assistant. So for many years before, like what you mentioned, Dark Knight Rises, Life of Pi, Kaminey, all these films, I was working as a camera assistant. And what that does is it gives you sort of a front row seat to the director's process, to the cinematographer's process, because you're always by the camera. You can see how they're working with the actors, how they're lighting, how the whole show sort of comes together. And I think that's something that I was very fortunate to have worked with some fantastic cinematographers and directors. And then I could take that learning and sort of formalize it when I went to film school, which is sort of the opposite of what a lot of people do. I had already gone to film school with several years of work experience. So it really helped me absorb, some of the learnings in that school environment. And once I finished film school, the first feature I shot was in 2013. It's a film called Prism, which, a really small budget, independent film that a bunch of film school, students had shot. So the director is a close friend of mine, and we put it together over the summer between our first and second year at film school. And that was really a trial by fire, because we were fresh out of these ideas that we had learned in film school, and it met the hard reality of making an indie movie, which is, full of all these challenges and always making the right compromises to tell your story. And I think that really told me how much I had learned and how much I still had to learn, because we shot it in 20 days. And, I think we had 34 locations. And moving around, we shot it in New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. So 3 states in 20 days. It was quite a wild ride. And the nice thing about it was that the film, had some sincerity to it, and it had a nice voice, and that definitely opened some doors for me, both in terms of future work and also meeting people that I would sort of go on to work with over the coming years.
So how it all started?
So, both my parents work in film, and so I grew up around film sets a lot. I spent a lot of my childhood on set, seeing them work and watching sort of how things were coming together from the perspective of a young person.
Really?
Um, yeah, my mother Himani Mehta Dehlvi, she's a costume designer, and my father Vasim has worked in documentaries, directed for television, also broadcast. So it gave me a really wide experience in terms of how these things come together, the behind the scenes. And very early on, I was sort of fascinated by the mechanisms of the camera, how you can be far away from something and see it in a close up, or how a dolly track can, even as a kid, it feels very magical. It feels like that's really where the magic is happening, before you can understand all the other things that go into making a film real. So I was always gravitated towards the camera, and then I think I was too young to work in the camera department, but I could shoot some stills. So it drew me into still photography, actually, and then I did still photography for some time. And then when I was studying, that took me back towards cinema, and then I started at the very bottom as a set production assistant, doing commercials, and again sort of just learning the ropes and making sure that I could lend a hand where I could. And one of the people I was working with introduced me to a cinematographer who took me onto his team. That was on Kaminey, and the cinematographer was Tasadduk Hussain, who had just shot Omkara prior to that, and then went on to shoot Kaminey. And Tasadduk had gone to the same school in LA where I went, and he was very encouraging. And just watching him work, also his methodology and the way he approached storytelling and lighting was really inspiring. And everything I asked him, he said, the answer to this is at the American Film Institute. So he really was encouraging and pushed me to put a portfolio together and help me apply. And I didn't apply right away. I continued to work for 5 or 6 years because I really wanted to make the most of my time in LA. And then I ended up at film school, and the journey continued from there.
But what is the most common misconception that people have about camera work, Farhad?
I think let me answer this in a slightly different way. I think if I do my job right, and the highest compliment you could tell me is that you don't feel the presence of the camera. You feel that you're connected directly to the story, directly to the emotions of the characters, and you're in the space. I think that a lot of cinematographers do this job really, really well. And so the layperson, when they're watching a movie, don't see the effort it goes into it. I think if you look at the behind the scenes of any movie, whether it's big or small, you'll see that immediately outside the edge of the frame, which looks exactly like, Gotham City or, Bombay or whatever the set of the film is, immediately outside the edge of the frame, there'll be like a forest of lights and flags and equipment and tracks and all that kind of stuff. And to do that requires a tremendous amount of not just planning, but also input from very talented people. Sometimes, like my camera department on Khufiya, the Vishal Bhardwaj film that I'm working on, is 30 plus people. And that's 30 people that are showing up every day at 5 a.m. and working really, really hard to make sure that the camera feels invisible and effortless, and that it's sort of like an uninterrupted cinematic journey for the audience. And I don't know if it's a misconception as much as I don't think that work is recognized enough, because our goal is to make it invisible and not to be showy or flashy or anything like that.
So then do you think people tend to mistake beautiful visuals for good cinematography? And is that the common mistake people make?
I don't know. I think beautiful visuals have their place. I never have, set out to make a beautiful image. I think beauty can often be a distraction because it's not specific to the story. I'm always looking for the right place to put the camera for where we want to be in the story. If we're doing something which is an intimate scene between two actors, maybe you don't need a big wide shot, or maybe you do need a big wide shot and it's a silhouette and you don't see their faces. And the fact that they are standing juxtaposed against this backdrop tells the story, for us. So there's so many ways to do it, but I think resorting to some sort of generic idea of beauty can be a shortcut, or it can be sort of like cheating the audience of what we really deserve to give them.
Sure. You just mentioned Khufiya. That's the film that you're shooting for Vishal Bhardwaj. You're also shooting Kutte. That's the film starring Arjun Kapoor and directed by Vishal Bhardwaj's son Asman. When and how you develop this bond and this working relationship with the Bhardwaj?
Yes, it's been quite a year with the Bhardwaj family, and a fantastic journey, and I'm really grateful for them bringing me on to both these projects. I'd worked on Kaminey as a camera assistant which was directed by Vishal Bhardwaj, and then our paths sort of diverged, and we were out of touch for the last 12 or 13 years. And I think somebody showed him my recent work about a year and a half ago, and that made him reach out. It was a call out of the blue. I was sitting in LA having my dinner, and the phone rang, and it was him. And he wanted to talk to me about a project and see some more of my work, and that really is where it all began. It was kind of like a cold call out of the blue. But I'm grateful to whoever showed him my work and brought us together again, because I've always admired his work, and his films have sort of always been a cut apart from the other work that I've seen coming out of Bombay. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity to work with him, and also Asman, who's a very visionary director in his own right, and I'm excited for the world to see what he's done in Kutte and what we've put together.
And finally, you of course have directed one short film also that was titled Seher Hone Tak. You are an established cinematographer, and you who also understand the medium of creating visuals. Do you think this gives you an edge as a director?
I think, my cinematography has definitely helped me understand the directing process better. That's one of the things I love about cinematography, is how closely you can work with the director and sort of get a window into their creative process. And I do direct in LA commercials and music videos and things like that. And, having worked now as a cinematographer, it helps me a lot understand not just the technical side of directing, but also just a director's perspective on cinematography. So when I'm working with a cinematographer on a music video or a commercial, I understand, what their expectations are from me and what I can do to help them sort of serve the project better. I think it's definitely a really good training ground. I want to keep shooting, don't get me wrong. I love cinematography, and one of the things that I love the most is being behind the camera. But my work as a DP has definitely informed the direction I want to take as a director as well going forward.
Farhad, thank you so much and best of luck.
Thank you so much, Vishal. Yeah, thank you for having me.